Hey everybody, this is Marley K coming to you today to talk about how white supremacy, white politics, and Black organizations collide and how that creates a problem for Black people in general, especially Black men. So I don't know if you know the National Black Justice Coalition is the organization that came out publicly against Dave Chappelle, um, along with the white LGBTQ community, opposing his stand-up. And so I just thought it was strange that this Black organization just kind of came out of nowhere and decided to talk. And I don't keep up with the you know information or goings on organizations with the LGBTQIA community because most of the organizations that are the loudest are white organizations and usually tied to Hollywood or politics. So because of my background working with public policy and different things like that, fundraising, following the money. I just don't really, when I know where somebody's money comes from or I know what their policy, advocacy, or lobbying is about, I tend to just kind of disconnect because at the end of the day, it's all the same BS. But with the National Black Justice Coalition, I kind of got the feeling that this organization was very similar to Black Lives Matter because they just kind of rolled up out of no place. It just seems like today most of the Black organizations are either white, tied to white feminism or tied to the white LGBTQIA plus community. Definitely not uh, pro-heterosexual families, Black straight people. Just it's either one or the other. So when I saw that and I had never seen this organization prior to, I was a little suspect. So I just started looking to see if I could figure out where the money was coming from and who was associated with this organization and who was, tied to funding. And I just got sucked into this rabbit hole. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I found. I'm going to put the information to the piece that I did on Medium in my link. Please share it. I'm going to just give you the highlights of it. But if you really want all the details, you have to go and read it because it's a lot of links, everything I provide. I also provide, documentation that's public information on Google, in the news, old news stories, Charity Navigator, different sites, everything that I use, you can use for free if you want to verify what we're talking about. But the purpose of it is just pretty much to make it clear that Black people cannot be misled by an organization these days because it's led by Black people, because they say this is what we stand for. If we haven't learned the lesson, over the last couple of years about organizations like the Congressional Black Caucus, the NAACP, and Black Lives Matter, we should be examining every organization that is coming out and saying it is representing us, especially if the mission does not include all the people in the Black community. This is always a red flag for me, because Black is Black. I'm Black first, Black all the time. I don't care what you do. If you're Black, I'm speaking on your behalf and I'm working on your behalf. So if you decide to segment and go off to something else that's not necessarily for our best interest, you're kind of on your own. But I kind of get the feeling that this organization, the National Black Justice Coalition, was similar to Black Lives Matter. And so I started digging, and when I started looking at the board members and the executive director. So I want to tell you the executive director is tied to President Obama. He was the first executive director of President Obama's White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans. And he was served in that role until 2017. Um, David Johns, the executive director of NBJC, also served as a senior policy advisor on the Senate Committee for Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions under Senator Tom Harkin, which is a Democrat, and the late Senator Ted Kennedy, who was also a Democrat. He also worked with the Congressional Black Caucus and Congressman Charles Rangel. So this individual that is leading this organization is closely tied to the Democratic Party and Capitol Hill and politics, which, you can't necessarily say it's good or bad, but I just want you to understand that these people that I'm telling you about have connections to politics and public policy and lobbying and creating and just creating elected officials. That's the best way I can put it. So the next person is their development manager. His name is Ryan Hurst. He's white. He's not Black, which is not problematic. But I want you to know that this organization that is pro-Black is not hiring Black development managers, people who can find money and fundraise for this organization. But this particular individual is really important because of what he's done. So this person, Brian Hurst, he served as the interim director of the Forward Florida Action, which is a voter registration, education, and re-engagement organization that former candidate for governor Andrew Gillum created. And I live in Florida, so I know all about what I'm telling you. But if you haven't heard about Andrew Gillum, just do some research and you see he was like the top candidate, shining star in the Democratic Party, and then all of a sudden he lost. But before he lost, there were just a lot of scandals with his campaigns, with money, with trips, just a whole lot of stuff. So that went on pretty much for the duration of the campaign. Then after the campaign was over, he settled some ethics complaints for ethics violations. But the guy who worked as the development director for the National Black Justice Coalition was the interim executive director for this organization. And somehow he ended up in DC. This individual also worked as a major gifts development officer for the College of Social Sciences and Public Policy at Florida State University. He's worked for Lambda Legal Defense and Education Fund, which is a LGBTQ organization. And then he worked, which I found most problematic, he worked for the People for American Way Foundation. And that organization basically grooms young elected officials. So he was a program manager for this organization's Young Elected Officials Network. Somehow, all these people are tied to politics. And another thing that stood out to me was this individual had never worked with any Black organizations, but he just kind of landed here. The money person landed with NBJC. And he fundraises. And I'm sure, as you know, anybody that fundraises, if you fundraise professionally, I have. When you leave a place, you take your contacts with you. You know people who, donate, you know where money comes from, you know about organizations, foundations, whatever. You take that information with you and you use it on your next job. So I'm sure that's what this person is doing. That's the purpose of him being where he is. Um, so that was another flag for me. And then the most problematic employee of this organization is the board chairwoman and CEO. She actually used to be the executive director of NBJC, and her name is Sharon Letman Hicks. Remember that name. Miss Hicks worked for People for the American Way Foundation, which is the same organization that Ryan Hurst, the guy I just told you about, who was the interim director from Andrew Gillum's organization that he founded in Florida. She also worked with the Young Elected Officials Network. She worked for Obama's campaign. I'm sorry, not campaign, but she also worked for Obama's Advisory Commission on Educational Excellence for African Americans. So she and David Johns had a relationship through working with this organization with President Obama, the first president who gave the LGBTQ community all these rights. So, you just keep all of this in mind, how these Black people are connecting and doing things. So the thing that was most problematic for NBJC's Ms. Hicks, the board chairwoman and CEO, is that she was the link to Andrew Gillum getting in trouble in Florida during his governor's campaign. So back in 2018, she actually worked for his campaign. And during the time she was with the campaign, there were lots of conflicts of interest, lots of ethics violations, lots of issues. There was a questionable loan to her, Ms. Hicks, and allegations of money laundering. So during this time, all this was going on, she still was employed with the National Black Justice Coalition, not as a board member, like she's a paid CEO, like she's supposed to be working for the organization. And then in my piece, I put some news stories in the piece about how the Andrew Gillum was tied to Sharon Letman Hicks and a loan for $320,000. They had consulting businesses that they commingled and did business with when Andrew Gillum was the mayor of Tallahassee. Ms. Hicks is from and currently lives in Tallahassee. So like there's a huge, long, deep connection with these two individuals. And for her to be tied to him down here in Florida, but also be affiliated with this organization was pretty interesting. So the next thing I want to talk about is the money. And where the money came from is interesting. So if you go to my piece, you'll see, some of their donors or all of their donors are people that don't give us crap directly. They don't do anything for the Black community. Twitch, the National Education Association, the Cartoon Network, Planned Parenthood, a couple of different foundations, Sephora, Procter and Gamble, all these big white conglomerate and national organizations and foundations that don't really do anything for Black people, which was another red flag for me. So they have a list of anchor investors on their website, but there are some funders that I found that were not noted on their website that were kind of controversial or questionable. Not necessarily controversial. Some of them are, but a lot of them are not. So like Adam for Adam. Adam for Adam is a gay dating and hookup site. And it is the site that Ed Buck, I don't know if you know about Ed Buck, but he's the wealthy Democratic Party political activist, wealthy businessman who used this site, Adam for Adam, to find black men to basically date rape, or they call it playing party or something, some type of fetish he had. But he liked having sex with black men, getting them high, having them walk around in white underwear. But anyway, whatever they do, um, he killed 2 black men, and it took a long time for him to actually come to trial, or be charged. And he wasn't charged until black people started making a big stink about it. But after the first man died, they ruled it an accident. The second man died, they ruled it an accident. And then they finally, after public outcry, did an investigation and decided to charge him. So now he's in jail. But anyway, this organization, Adam for Adam, gave National Black Justice Coalition $10,000. Now, if you know anything about nonprofit organizations, and you know how fundraising goes, when you run a nonprofit organization, you try to shy away, or you tend to not accept public donations from donors who could bring shame upon the organization's name and mission, and call into question ethics. Well, this is one of those donations that they shouldn't have taken, especially in light of this man being in jail for killing black men, but they took this organization's money. So I found that a little strange. And in my story, I put a link to the actual press release where Adam for Adam noted that they raised $10,000 and gave it to the National Black Justice Coalition in 2020. Another thing that I found was that the organization is registered to be in Washington, D.C. on K Street. And if you know anything about K Street, that's where all the lobbyists and advocacy groups who lobby politicians in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill, that's where the majority of them do business. So the fact that it's on K Street also was a flag for me for the CEO and executive director. So it's kind of like they're not really there to do business for us. That organization, appears to be set up to do, is an extension of the Democratic Party to target black subgroups. So that was a little alarming. Also, the organization had a lot of money, dark money coming into it. There were issues with the travel budget. The CEO who stepped down from being the executive director to just being a CEO that may or may not be in the area. I don't know how you do business in Washington, D.C., but your address is in Tallahassee, and then you're all over the place consulting, doing, political stuff. So it's a lot of conflict of interest with the CEO, which was questionable to me. Another thing that was really questionable but stood out to me, and what brings all of this home, ties into why they were so adamant about speaking out with Dave Chappelle, is that the National Black Justice Coalition received a federal grant for $279,000 to target its communication to Black communities. And the abstract of this grant award said that they would use their already established national reach through social media, earned media, um, grassroots networks, and collaborative partnerships to support the Centers of Disease Control's Let's Stop HIV Together efforts to disseminate HIV prevention messaging and communication with Black communities, particularly among MSM, which is basically men who sleep with men, and transgender women, to implement national engagement efforts that focus on HIV prevention, awareness, testing, and care. So for me, this was what brought it all home. So them being so vocal and opposed to this Dave Chappelle um, show is because they had funding in order to communicate on our behalf for this particular community and to do like national outreach. So getting on TV and saying whatever they said, how little or how much they said counts as outreach effort. So every network they talk to, anytime they were quoted in a magazine, whatever, like that's a part of networking or reach for them. And so they get credit for doing that for their grant proposal, even though they didn't say anything about, stopping HIV. They still are out there because their name is National Black Justice Coalition, and they were representing the populations, the men who sleep with men and transgender women. They made sure they threw transgender in there. So it's basically they joined with the white LGBTQ community, said this is what we're doing until they get credit for it. So, when you see these organizations come out in opposition to some things, especially when it has to do with Black people and heterosexual and same-sex, transgender, um, bisexual men or women, like there is a motive, and I can't express it enough. Like we just cannot in this hour trust these organizations. Everybody has a motive. Everybody is trying to keep us divided so they can conquer us. Divided so we stay distracted, and misled so that we continue the system of white supremacy. They are on a mission. If we stay asleep, confused, lost, not following money, not understanding what their agendas are, then they win. So I need y'all to start following the money. When you see something, it's not enough to just be like, oh, they represent, the LGBTQ community, they don't speak for us or whatever. Just, whatever the verbal divisions are, we have to start following the money. And we have to do a better job of talking about what we discover, because, I didn't see anybody digging into this organization's finances or the leadership. Nothing. Everybody's just kind of like, oh, they're just loud LGBTQIA people attached to the white LGBTQIA community. Let's ignore them. I feel like we should ignore them, but we also should investigate them because they often have hidden agendas and are funded by dark money. And when we don't necessarily pay attention to it, whether we realize it or not, they're successful because they keep a lot of us misled. And even people that are not a part of the community, there were a lot of Black people who took sides and supported the Black LGBTQ community when it wasn't even their fight. the white LGBTQ community came out in opposition. And then all of a sudden, a Black LGBTQ IA plus organization came out in opposition of a Black man. And I'm like, what is happening? What? So that whole thing, it was flags for us, but I don't think people really understood what was happening at the time. And like Dave Chappelle eventually said, this riff is about what he can say and what he cannot say. And the dominant society is trying to stop Black men from talking, especially heterosexual Black men. There's an agenda to shut us up, emasculate Black men, separate Black families, um, stop Black children from being born, decreasing our population size because there's an agenda to try to decrease us so they can go on with the business of white supremacy, because we are pretty much the only oppositions to it. Everybody else is co-signing. Immigrants come here, they get right on the white supremacy train and they keep on rolling. We are the opposition, so we have to be alert when we are advocating our interests, because we have all sorts of things that are coming at us. So I included a link for this particular federal award that this organization got. But as I'm talking about this, there are so many things that were questionable with the CEO. So the CEO was also tied to another organization, a foundation that did educational advocacy. But according to some sites that I looked at, the name of the organization is the SHOT Foundation. And it's a national foundation that says it fuels social justice and racial justice movements and promotes equity and opportunity in public education. So the CEO, Chairwoman Hicks, was on the board of this organization. And really, this organization is set up to disrupt moving organizations. It's not really there to do what it's supposed to do. It's one of the dark money sites. So I put a link to the story with the CEO being welcomed to the board. And then you'll find that there are links to all sorts of money, like the Tide Center. And I don't know if you know anything about the Tide Center, but the Tide Center is like a huge dark money organization. And what they do is they fund both sides of white supremacy to influence public policy. And so they give a lot of money, or they, in the past couple of years, they've given a lot of money to Black-led organizations so they can influence policy. Influence policy for us is never good. That means we're going to be losing out on something, and we need to be influenced, distracted, misled, so that the policies that they want to be implemented can happen. Because we're distracted about other stuff. We worried about, sex and gender and pronouns, and they stealing the fucking country away from us. So, giving away money that could go towards our reparations. So when you talk about fights and things that we should be paying attention to, we gotta really, really, really get down to the business of doing business. And we have not done a good job of that. So if you have a chance, please take a look at the piece. The link is in the bio, but I just want to make you aware that there are going to be a lot of Black organizations that pop up that we've never heard of. There are going to be a lot of Black people on TV talking on behalf of Black people you have never seen. You don't know them. You don't know anything about what they do. You listen, write the names down, write the names of those organizations down, and do your research. Find out what the mission is. If the mission has something to do with LGBTQ, you're going to find a lot of organizations that are popping up, especially those tied to getting us registered to vote. That's what they do. They have Black in the name, but the mission don't have really anything to do with Black people in general. It's very specific to LGBTQIA, transgender issues, LGBTQ social justice, HIV/AIDS awareness, um, domestic violence stuff. Doesn't really have anything to do with what we're talking about when it comes to housing, economics, job, work, finances, public policy, um, the things that we need to keep our communities together. Like, they're just not really addressing any of those issues. So we can't allow those organizations to talk for us. We can't allow them to speak on our behalf, because they don't speak for us. They're speaking for white supremacy. So when I say it's a Black organization that's doing white politics or has a white politics issue, that's what I mean. I mean, they are not working for us. They're working on behalf of white supremacy. And we have to do a better job of checking that out. So again, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the research that I did. Please like the video, share the video, talk about it, because this organization is going to come up again. If we don't nip these organizations in the bud and chop them down like we did with Black Lives Matter, they'll just pop up. And if we don't say anything about them, they'll just grow. They're getting dark money as we speak. And if we don't do something about it, when 2022 and 2024 comes around, they'll have a whole bunch of money to do um, television marketing, ads, um, get free TV spots because something will happen and they'll insert themselves into the conversation. And then before you know it, we're misled, or people in our community will be misled. So don't listen to any Black organization with a Black face talking about they represent Black people. Do your research. Follow the money, because it's a lot of Black people misleading Black people. And we don't have time for that. Like, we got business to take care of. So do your research. Check out the link in the bio to the story. It's free to read. You don't have to pay anything for it. Read it, share it. Click on the links. Go to the places that, take you to wherever you need to go to find the resources. Don't believe me. Look for yourself, and then make a decision about what you know, and maybe to change your perspective about the Dave Chappelle role, because what you'll find is that some of this is manufactured, like all of it pretty much is manufactured to keep us divided, so that when it's time for them to push the policies they want, we are not paying attention. And so while we were fussing about Dave Chappelle and this show, they doing Build Back Better, trying to give immigrants $450,000 and amnesty and all types of things, while we're asking for reparations and they don't give us anything. So while you're bickering about the superficial stuff, the people that are trying to influence policy they're doing it backdoor indirectly. And so you have to be aware of the fact that this is happening, and that Black people are helping them, whether they're doing it knowingly or not. The butter biscuits are good. The money is there. They are getting it hand over fist to screw us over. And this is not anything new. We just have to be more aware that it's happening. And, just do your due diligence. Don't follow people willy-nilly, because it's just not the time for that. So thank you for watching. Like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will be back soon with some more tea. Have a great evening.